most people quietly struggle with, but rarely get a clear explanation for. What I often hear is frustration. People tell me they wake up one morning and feel that something has shifted, not dramatically, but subtly. Their midsection feels tighter than it used to. Their sleep isn't as restorative. Their thinking feels just a bit slower, a little less sharp. And they'll say, I haven't changed how I eat. I'm still active. So what's going on? What's happening isn't a lack of discipline. And it's not simply aging in the way we've been taught to accept it. After about the age of 60, fat accumulation, especially around the abdomen, stops being primarily about calories. It becomes much more about stress physiology, inflammation, and how cells respond to hormonal signals. That's the part that often gets missed. Most people still think in terms of energy balance. Eat less, move more, and while that model works reasonably well when you're younger, it becomes increasingly inaccurate as we age. The fat that accumulates deep in the abdomen, what we call visceral fat, behaves very differently from subcutaneous fat. It's metabolically active. It communicates with the rest of the body and not in a helpful way. One of the key players here is cortisol, the body's main stress hormone. Cortisol is essential. We need it to wake up in the morning, to mobilize energy, to respond to threats. But when cortisol remains elevated chronically, from poor sleep, blood sugar instability, psychological stress, or low-grade inflammation, it sends a very specific message to the body: conserve energy, store fat. Visceral fat is particularly sensitive to this signal because it contains a high density of cortisol receptors. That's why chronic stress often shows up physically around the waist. And once that fat is there, it doesn't just sit quietly. It releases inflammatory molecules that interfere with insulin signaling. Insulin resistance then develops, and when cells stop responding properly to insulin, fat burning effectively shuts down. At that point, even reducing calories doesn't solve the problem. The body is in storage mode. This is why I'm very cautious when people blame themselves. In most cases, the body isn't broken. It's responding exactly as it evolved to, just in an environment it wasn't designed for. The encouraging part is that this cycle can be interrupted. And what's interesting is that some of the most effective interventions are not dramatic. They're subtle signals that shift cellular behavior. One of those signals comes from olive oil, but not olive oil as most people use it. In its proper form, high-quality extra virgin olive oil acts less like a food and more like a metabolic regulator. It activates pathways inside the cell, particularly a gene network known as PPAR-alpha, which promotes fat oxidation. When this pathway is engaged, cells begin burning stored fat more readily. Mitochondrial efficiency improves. Ketone production increases, which the brain prefers as an energy source. At the same time, triglyceride levels tend to decline, which reduces cardiovascular risk. This helps explain why populations that consume olive oil consistently over decades often maintain metabolic health well into old age. It's not genetics, it's long-term signaling. Olive oil also has a significant effect on blood sugar regulation. When consumed appropriately, it enhances the release of GLP-1, a hormone that slows gastric emptying and moderates insulin response. Interestingly, this is the same hormone targeted by many modern weight loss medications. Olive oil influences it naturally without pharmacological intervention. The practical outcome is fewer glucose spikes, less insulin secretion, and reduced fat storage following meals. People often notice they feel more satisfied and less prone to cravings. Another important aspect is cortisol regulation. Certain fatty acids and polyphenols in olive oil support the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the system that governs our stress response. When that system functions properly, cortisol levels normalize rather than remaining chronically elevated. Olive oil also improves vagal tone, which shifts the nervous system toward a parasympathetic restorative state. When the body perceives safety rather than threat, metabolism changes, repair processes activate. Fat burning becomes permissible again. Inflammation is another critical piece. Extra virgin olive oil contains oleocanthal, a compound that inhibits inflammatory enzymes in a way that's biochemically similar to ibuprofen, but without the gastrointestinal or hepatic side effects. Lower inflammation improves insulin sensitivity and restores hormonal communication between cells. One of the more fascinating findings in recent years involves autophagy, the body's cellular recycling process. Polyphenols in olive oil stimulate autophagy, allowing damaged cellular components to be cleared and replaced. This improves cellular efficiency and energy production. It also appears to occur in neural tissue, which may explain why some people experience improved clarity and reduced brain fog. So why don't more people experience these benefits? There are 3 common reasons. The first is oil quality. A substantial percentage of olive oil on the market is oxidized, diluted, or improperly labeled. Rancid oil increases oxidative stress rather than reducing it. In that case, people may think they're doing something healthy while actually worsening inflammation. The second issue is misunderstanding heat stability. Despite older assumptions, extra virgin olive oil is relatively stable during moderate cooking due to its antioxidant content. It shouldn't be overheated or smoked, but it performs better than many seed oils under normal cooking conditions. The third factor is timing. The body operates on circadian rhythms. Hormonal sensitivity changes throughout the day. When olive oil is used strategically rather than randomly, its effects are amplified. Consuming it in a fasted state in the morning can blunt excessive cortisol release and improve insulin sensitivity for the entire day. Pairing it with polyphenol-rich vegetables enhances its metabolic signaling. Using it before a large meal reduces post-meal glucose and insulin excursions. Even in the evening, a small amount may support serotonin and melatonin production, improving sleep quality and reducing nighttime cortisol spikes. Quality matters greatly. Early harvest, cold-pressed single-origin oil stored in dark glass retains the highest polyphenol content. A simple sensory test, a peppery sensation in the throat, often indicates active polyphenols. When people apply this consistently, the changes are usually gradual but noticeable. Reduced bloating, improved sleep, more stable energy. Over time, waist circumference decreases due to actual fat loss rather than water fluctuation. What's important to understand is that this approach isn't about forcing the body into submission. It's about restoring communication, lowering stress signals, reducing inflammation, allowing metabolic pathways that already exist to function again. The body retains a remarkable capacity for repair, even later in life. Often, it doesn't need aggressive intervention. It needs the right signals, delivered consistently, and sometimes the most effective interventions are also the most ordinary when we finally understand how to use them properly.